3 days ago, I was supposed to be dead. Floating somewhere in the Caribbean Sea, another tragic cruise ship accident that nobody questions too closely. My son had it all planned out. The tears, the funeral, the life insurance payout. But here's the thing about underestimating a 72-year-old woman who's buried her husband and survived every curveball life can throw. We don't die as easily as people think we do. I'm standing in my own kitchen right now, watching the news report about my mysterious disappearance, while my son gives interviews about his poor, confused mother who wandered off a ship and was never seen again. He's actually crying on camera. Real tears. Amazing what people can do when there's money involved, isn't it? You see, my name is Natasha, and 3 months ago I thought I knew exactly who my son was. I thought I understood the depth of human greed and deception after burying my husband, and watching relatives circle like vultures around his will. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I discovered about my own flesh and blood. They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when that blood runs cold with calculated betrayal? What happens when the child you raised, the boy who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms, looks you in the eye and plans your disappearance? I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everyone you trust. It starts with what seemed like the most thoughtful gift, the Caribbean cruise from a son who just wanted his mum to relax. It ends with me standing in that courthouse, about to file papers that would change everything. But before I tell you how it all unravelled, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just about revenge. This is about what happens when you underestimate a woman who survived 7 decades of life's hardest lessons. This is about the moment when a grandmother stops being the victim and becomes the architect of justice. The cruise ship ticket is still in my purse. Want to know why I kept it? Because it reminds me of the day I learned that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who know exactly where to aim. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let me tell you about the most expensive vacation I never took, and how it saved my life in ways you'd never imagine. Before we dive deeper, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone close to you completely blindside you with their betrayal? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from around the world. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Let me take you back to that Tuesday evening in March when my world flipped upside down. Columbus was getting its first real taste of spring, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt as I drove over to my son's house in the suburbs. His name is Cameron, by the way. 45 years old, married to Angela for 12 years, father to my precious grandchildren, Zoe, who's 9, and little Tyler, who just turned 6. On paper, Cameron looked like he had it all figured out. Nice house in a good neighbourhood, steady job in insurance, wife who worked part-time at a dental office. But that Tuesday night, the mask came off. I'd stopped by to drop off some financial documents Cameron had requested earlier that week, something about needing copies of Dad's old insurance policies for record keeping. Should have been my first red flag, honestly, but at 72 you want to believe your children have good intentions. The front door was slightly open, not unusual for Cameron's house. Angela was always forgetting to close it properly after bringing in groceries or chasing the kids outside. I pushed it open gently, not wanting to startle anyone or wake the little ones if they'd already gone to bed. "Cameron! Angela! It's just me!" I called out softly. No response. The living room was empty, but I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Low, serious voices. The kind of conversation that makes you instinctively walk quieter. I made my way down the hallway, those old floorboards creaking under my feet despite my careful steps. The kitchen light was on, casting long shadows into the dining room where I found myself frozen, listening to words that would haunt me for months. By the time the ship docks, the deed will already be transferred. Cameron's voice was cold, businesslike. Nothing like the warm tone he used when talking to his children, or even to me during our Sunday phone calls. She won't be coming back. It's a one-way ticket. My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the dining room wall, my hands trembling as I clutched those documents. They were talking about me. My own son was talking about me like I was some kind of obstacle to remove. Angela's laugh sent chills down my spine. It wasn't her usual bright giggle. This was something darker, more calculating. She won't even see it coming, will she? All those years of playing the sweet, helpless widow. She has no idea what we've been planning. The gambling debts won't wait much longer, Cameron said, and I heard the stress crack through his cold facade. Those people in Vegas aren't exactly known for their patience. This has to work. Gambling debts? Vegas? My mind was racing, trying to piece together information I never knew existed. My successful insurance salesman's son was in debt to dangerous people. "How much longer until the cruise ship leaves?" Angela asked. 3 days. I've already confirmed the booking. She's so excited about it, keeps thanking me for being so thoughtful. The bitter irony in his voice made my stomach turn. By the time anyone realizes she's not coming back, we'll have transferred everything. The house, the savings, the trust fund Dad left her. Wait, they thought they could access my trust fund. I backed away from the kitchen as quietly as possible, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. Every step toward the front door felt like it took forever. The documents in my hands felt heavier with each passing second. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Cameron say something that froze me one last time. "Mom always said Dad left everything protected in trusts and legal stuff she didn't understand. She's so trusting, she'll sign anything I put in front of her." That's when something inside me shifted. The fear, the shock, the heartbreak, it all crystallized into something much more dangerous. Cold, calculated anger. I slipped out of that house like a shadow, got into my car, and sat there for 10 minutes in the driveway, shaking. Not from fear anymore, but from fury. You see, what Cameron didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he never paid attention to anything beyond his own needs, was that his father and I had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of scenario. Not necessarily betrayal from our own son, but protection from anyone who might try to take advantage of a widow. As I drove home that night, I whispered the words that would become my battle cry. "All right, darling, we'll do it your way. But you're going to regret this 3 times over." The cruise ticket was waiting on my kitchen counter when I got home. Bright, cheerful, promising 7 days of Caribbean sunshine and relaxation. I smiled as I picked it up. Oh, I was going on this cruise all right, but not for the reasons my son expected. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Cameron's voice over and over, cold, calculating, talking about me like I was already gone. But lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan that had squeaked for 3 years but I'd never bothered to fix, other memories started flooding back. Little things I'd dismissed. Red flags I'd painted green because I wanted to believe in my son's goodness. Like 6 months ago, when Cameron started asking detailed questions about my finances. "Mom, you know Dad always handled the money stuff. Maybe I should help you understand what you've got." He'd been so patient, so caring. I thought he was genuinely worried about me managing alone. Or that time 3 months back when he brought me papers to sign. "Just updating some beneficiary information, Mom. Dad would want everything current." I'd signed without reading carefully because, God help me, I trusted him completely. The smell of my husband's cologne still lingered faintly in our bedroom, even 2 years after his death. Richard had been the cautious one, the planner. "Tasha," he used to say, using that pet name that made me feel like a young bride again. "People change when money's involved. Even good people. Even family." I used to argue with him about that. "Not our Cameron," I'd insist. "We raised him better than that." Richard would just kiss my forehead and say, "I hope you're right, sweetheart, but I'm not leaving anything to chance." Now, sitting up in bed at 2 in the morning, I finally understood what my husband had been trying to protect me from. The irony was bitter as black coffee. He'd been preparing for betrayal, but never imagined it would come from our own son. I padded to the kitchen in my nightgown and made tea, my hands still trembling slightly. The cruise brochure was spread across my kitchen table where Cameron had left it, all glossy photos of happy couples dining under Caribbean stars and families laughing on pristine beaches. 7 days of paradise, the headline promised. Leave your worries behind. If only they knew their brochure was advertising what was supposed to be my final vacation. Literally. As I sipped my chamomile tea, I started thinking about the timeline. Cameron had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every caring gesture, every concerned phone call, every time he'd hugged me a little too long and said, "I love you, Mum." It had all been part of setting up his cover story. The grieving son whose mother tragically never returned from her dream cruise. But here's what Cameron didn't know about his old mother. I'd spent 47 years married to a man who taught me that trust is earned, not given. Richard might have handled most of our finances, but he made sure I understood every single protection he put in place. The family trust wasn't just in my name. It was structured in ways that would make any lawyer proud. Granddaughter Zoe was already the primary beneficiary of most assets, with controls that prevented anyone from accessing them until she turned 25. The lake house Cameron had always coveted, Zeri's name was on those papers too. And my personal accounts? Well, let's just say Richard had been very thorough about making sure no one could forge signatures or manipulate transfers without multiple verifications. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found David Harrington's number. David had been Richard's attorney and close friend for over 20 years. More importantly, he was someone I could trust completely, one of the few people who'd helped Richard set up all those protective measures. It was too late to call now, but first thing in the morning I was going to have a very interesting conversation with David. Because here's the thing about us sweet, helpless widows. Sometimes we know a lot more than we let on. Sometimes we've been preparing for battles we hoped would never come. I finished my tea and headed back to bed, but not before stopping by my bedroom safe. Inside, beneath some old jewellery and important documents, was a folder labelled Emergency Contacts and Procedures. Richard had insisted I memorise the contents, even though I'd complained it was unnecessary. "Just humour an old worrier," he'd said with that gentle smile of his. Tonight I was grateful for his paranoia. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself smiling for the first time since hearing that conversation. Cameron thought he was playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules. He was about to discover that his mother had been learning this game for 72 years, and I'd never lost a match that mattered. The next morning came with one of those Ohio spring days that tricks you into thinking winter might actually be over. Sunshine streamed through my kitchen windows as I made my first cup of coffee, and for a moment, just a brief, blissful moment, I almost forgot about the nightmare I'd walked into 12 hours earlier. Then my doorbell rang. "Special delivery!" chirped a young woman in a bright uniform, holding an enormous gift basket wrapped in cellophane and topped with a massive red bow. "From Cameron and Angela Mitchell." I signed for it with a smile plastered on my face, thanking her warmly while my insides churned. The moment the door closed, I set the basket on my dining room table and stared at it like it might explode. The basket was beautiful, I'll give them that. Premium chocolates, fancy bath salts, a silk eye mask, travel-sized lotions that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. A card nestled among the goodies, written in Angela's neat handwriting. "Dear Mum Natasha, we're so excited for your adventure. You deserve every moment of relaxation and joy this cruise will bring. Take lots of pictures and make wonderful memories. We love you so much. Cameron, Angela, Zoe, and Tyler." I had to sit down. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They'd sat down and planned this presentation. Angela had probably spent an hour choosing just the right items, making sure everything looked perfect. Cameron had likely stood over her shoulder suggesting additions. "Don't forget the travel lotion. Mum loves that lavender scent." They'd involved the children in signing the card. My precious grandchildren, completely innocent in all this, had added their little handprints at the bottom in purple ink. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theatre. They were so confident in their plan that they were actually enjoying the performance. I picked up my phone and called David Harrington's office. His secretary, Mrs. Chen, had been with the firm for decades and remembered me from various meetings with Richard. "Natasha, how lovely to hear from you. What can we do for you today?" "I need to speak with David urgently. It's about my estate planning, and I'm afraid it's quite time-sensitive." "Oh my, let me check his schedule. Can you come in this afternoon? He has an opening at 2:30. "Perfect. Thank you so much." After hanging up, I sat quietly with my coffee and really looked at that gift basket. Every item had been chosen to reinforce the narrative. Sweet, elderly mother going on a well-deserved vacation. The travel accessories suggested someone planning to be gone for a while. The expensive bath products implied luxury and indulgence, exactly what you'd expect someone to want for their final journey. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Tucked between the chocolates and a small bottle of champagne was a travel insurance brochure. Not just any travel insurance. Comprehensive coverage that included accidental death and disappearance benefits. My hands shook as I opened it. Someone had already filled out most of the paperwork in Cameron's name as the beneficiary. All it needed was my signature. The pieces of their plan were falling into place with horrifying clarity. They weren't just planning to steal from me while I was gone. They were hoping I wouldn't come back at all. And if something accidentally happened to me on that cruise ship, well, there would be insurance money to collect too. I'd raised a monster. The phone rang, startling me from my dark thoughts. Cameron's number flashed on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Mum, did you get your surprise basket?" "I did, honey. It's absolutely beautiful. You and Angela went to so much trouble. We wanted everything to be perfect for your trip. Are you getting excited?" "Oh, very excited," I said, looking at that insurance paperwork. "I can hardly wait to set sail." "Good. Oh, and Mum, there's some paperwork in there, just travel insurance stuff. Super boring, but you should probably fill it out before you go. You know how these cruise companies are about liability. Of course, dear. I'll take care of it today. We chatted for a few more minutes about the weather, the kids, normal mother-son things. When I hung up, I felt like I'd just performed the role of my life. But the show was far from over. I had an appointment with David in 6 hours, and by the time I walked into his office, I was going to have a complete battle plan. Game on, Cameron. The hours before my appointment with David crawled by like cold honey. I spent them doing something I'd avoided for months, really looking at my relationship with Cameron and Angela through clear, unforgiving eyes. I made myself a list, not the kind of list you write when you're grocery shopping or planning a garden, but the kind you make when you're building a legal case. Every strange conversation, every odd request, every moment when something felt just slightly off, but I dismissed it because he was my son. The pattern was ugly once I stopped making excuses for it. Last Christmas, Cameron had insisted on taking photos of every room in my house for the family album. He'd been particularly interested in my home office, asking detailed questions about where I kept important papers. Angela had distracted me in the kitchen while he spent 20 minutes alone in there. In January, he'd offered to help me organise my financial documents. "Mum, you've got papers scattered everywhere. What if there's an emergency and we can't find anything?" He'd been so persistent that I'd finally let him photocopy several items, including some banking information. In February, the questions about my health had started. Not normal son worried about aging mother questions, but probing inquiries about my medications, my doctor visits, whether I'd updated my medical directives recently. Angela had even suggested I might want to consider simplifying my living situation. These big old houses can be so much work for someone your age, Mum Natasha. And then there were the phone calls to my doctor's office that I'd only learned about 2 weeks ago. Dr. Patel's nurse had mentioned in passing that Cameron had called asking about my overall prognosis and whether I was handling stress well. When I'd asked Cameron about it, he'd brushed it off as normal concern. Now I understood. He'd been building a narrative of a declining, possibly confused elderly woman who might make impulsive decisions or, God forbid, have some kind of accident. The doorbell interrupted my dark inventory. Through the peephole, I saw Angela standing on my porch with little Tyler, both of them smiling brightly. "Grandma Natasha!" Tyler launched himself into my arms the moment I opened the door, his 6-year-old energy immediately lifting my spirits despite everything. "Mummy says you're going on a big boat." "I am, sweetheart. A very big boat." I hugged him tight, breathing in that little boy's smell of graham crackers and playground dirt. Angela followed us into the living room, looking perfectly put together in her yoga pants and designer jacket. "I hope you don't mind us dropping by. Tyler wanted to see you before your big trip, and I thought maybe we could help you pack." Help me pack. Of course. That's so thoughtful, but I'm actually not leaving until Sunday. Plenty of time. Oh, I know, but packing for a cruise can be so overwhelming. All those formal nights and day activities. You want to make sure you have everything you need. Tyler had already discovered the gift basket and was examining the chocolates with the focused intensity only small children can muster. "Grandma, are these the fancy ones with the squiggly stuff inside?" "They are, buddy. Would you like to try one?" While Tyler was distracted with chocolate, Angela wandered around my living room, her eyes scanning everything with what I now recognised as calculated interest. "You know, Mum Natasha, Cameron and I have been talking about how quiet this house must get for you, especially at night. Have you ever thought about maybe staying with us for a while after your cruise, Just until you decide what you want to do long term. What I want to do long term? Well, you know, the house is getting older. Maintenance costs keep going up, and you're all alone out here. We have that spare room, and the kids would love having you closer. I watched her run her fingers along my mantelpiece, pausing to examine a small antique clock that had been Richard's grandmother's. "This is lovely," she murmured. "Such a shame when beautiful old things just sit empty with no one to appreciate them." The audacity was breathtaking. She was literally appraising my belongings while suggesting I abandon my home. "I appreciate the concern," I said carefully, "but I'm quite comfortable here." "Of course you are. I just meant, well, after such a big trip, you might want to simplify things, make life easier." Tyler finished his chocolate and climbed onto my lap, chocolate fingerprints decorating his cheek. "Grandma, will you bring me a shell from the beach?" "I'll bring you the most beautiful shell I can find, sweetheart." Angela's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, Mum Natasha, about souvenirs, you should probably pack light on the way back. Cruise ships have all those weight restrictions for luggage. Pack light on the way back, because in their plan, I wouldn't be coming back at all." After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine fear. Not of dying. At 72 you make peace with mortality. But fear of what my disappearance would do to those innocent grandchildren, and what kind of people they'd grow up thinking their parents were. That's when I realized this wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about protecting them from the truth of what their parents had become. And sometimes, the only way to protect people from the truth is to make sure justice gets served first. David Harrington's law office hadn't changed much in the 2 years since Richard's funeral. Same oak furniture, same wall of legal books, same reassuring smell of leather and coffee that made you feel like serious, important work happened here. David himself looked older, more silver in his hair, deeper lines around his kind eyes, but his handshake was still firm, and his smile still carried that warmth that had made him Richard's closest friend for over 2 decades. "Natasha, you look wonderful. How are you holding up?" "Better than some people expect," I said, settling into the familiar leather chair across from his desk. "David, I need your help with something, and I'm afraid it's going to shock you." His expression grew serious immediately. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The overheard conversation, the gift basket, the insurance papers, Angela's house visit, all the red flags I'd been ignoring for months. David listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Natasha, what you're describing, this isn't just family greed. This sounds like conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly worse. How certain are you about what you heard?" "Certain enough to know I need protection. And David, I need to know exactly what Richard put in place. All of it." He turned to his computer and pulled up files I hadn't seen since those long, boring meetings years ago, when Richard insisted on getting everything sorted properly. "The good news is, your husband was extraordinarily thorough. The trust structure he created would be nearly impossible for Cameron to penetrate, even with forged documents. Most of your major assets, the house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, they're all protected." Relief flooded through me. "What about the lake house?" "That's been in a separate trust with Zoe as the primary beneficiary since she was born. Cameron has no legal claim to it whatsoever. But he doesn't know that." David smiled grimly. "Based on what you've told me, I don't think Cameron understands the complexity of what Richard set up. He's operating under assumptions that could land him in serious legal trouble." We spent the next hour going through every document, every protection, every legal safeguard Richard had put in place. It was like discovering a secret fortress I'd been living in without realizing how strong the walls were. But then David asked the question I'd been dreading. "Natasha, what do you want to do with this information? Because you have some serious decisions to make." "What are my options?" "Well, you could confront Cameron directly. You could refuse to go on the cruise. You could involve law enforcement immediately." He paused. Or you could let them proceed with their plan and see just how far they're willing to go. With proper documentation, of course. The idea sent a chill through me. "You mean go on the cruise?" "I mean, give them enough rope to hang themselves. If they're planning fraud on this scale, they've probably already committed several crimes. But catching them in the act, with proper evidence." I thought about Tyler's chocolate-stained smile, about Zoe's laughter during our Saturday afternoon tea parties. "David, if this goes to court, those children will be destroyed. They'll be more destroyed growing up with parents who are criminals," he said gently. "Natasha, I knew Richard for 25 years. He loved those grandchildren fiercely, but he loved Justice more. What do you think he'd want you to do?" Before I could answer, his secretary knocked and entered with an apologetic look. "Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a Cameron Mitchell on the phone. He says it's urgent, and about his mother." David and I looked at each other. "Put him through," David said. The phone rang, and David answered on speaker. "David Harrington speaking." "Mr. Harrington, this is Cameron Mitchell, Richard Mitchell's son. I'm calling about my mother, Natasha." "What can I do for you, Cameron?" "Well, she's going on this cruise next week, and I'm worried about her handling all her financial stuff while she's gone. She's been, well, a little confused lately about money matters. I was wondering if maybe I should have power of attorney, just temporarily, to handle anything that comes up while she's travelling." David's eyebrows shot up. He looked at me and I nodded. "That's an interesting request, Cameron. Has your mother expressed confusion about her finances?" "Oh, you know how it is. She's getting older, and since Dad died, she's just not as sharp about these things. I don't want her worrying about bills or anything while she's trying to relax." "I see. And this power of attorney, what exactly would you need it for?" "Just basic stuff. Paying bills, handling any bank business that might come up. Maybe some insurance matters. Nothing major." David was taking notes, his expression carefully neutral. "Cameron, that's quite a responsibility. Have you discussed this with your mother?" "Well, not exactly. I didn't want to worry her with all the legal details. You know how she is about complicated stuff." "Actually, Cameron, I don't know how she is about complicated stuff. In all my years working with your parents, your mother has always been quite sharp about financial matters." There was a pause. "Well, sure, but that was when Dad was alive. Things are different now." "Different how?" Another pause, longer this time. "Look, Mr. Harrington, I'm just trying to take care of my mother. Isn't that what sons are supposed to do?" "Absolutely. Taking care of parents is admirable. But temporary power of attorney is a significant legal instrument. I'd need to speak with your mother directly about something like that." "Oh, that's not necessary. She trusts me to handle these things." "I'm sure she does, Cameron. But as her attorney, I have certain obligations. If you'd like to discuss this further, I'd suggest you and your mother come in together for a consultation." "That won't be necessary," Cameron said quickly. "I'll figure something else out." The line went dead. David and I sat in silence for a moment. "Well," he said finally, "I'd say we just got confirmation of exactly what they're planning." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "David, I want to go on that cruise." "Natasha, I want to go on that cruise, and I want you to document every single thing they do while I'm gone. Every forged signature, every attempted transfer, every lie they tell. That could be dangerous. Staying here and doing nothing is dangerous. At least this way, we control the game." David studied my face for a long moment. "You know, you remind me a lot of your husband right now. That same look he got when someone tried to cheat him in business. Richard always said the best defense is a good offense." "All right, Natasha. If you're determined to do this, we're going to do it right. But first, we need to have a very serious conversation about what happens if things go wrong." As we began planning what would become the most dangerous vacation of my life, I couldn't help but smile. Cameron thought he was playing chess with a helpless old woman. He was about to discover that his mother had learned to play hardball from a master. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad and a cup of tea, making 2 lists. The first was everything I needed to pack for a Caribbean cruise. The second was everything I needed to arrange to catch my son red-handed. The cruise list was easy: sundresses, comfortable shoes, that blue swimsuit I'd bought but never worn, sunscreen, and my camera. Normal grandmother on vacation items. The second list was more complex. David had agreed to monitor all my accounts while I was gone, with detailed instructions to document any attempted access or transfers. We'd set up a special code system. If I called and mentioned the weather being particularly stormy, he'd know to activate emergency protocols. More importantly, we'd arranged for a private investigator named Marcus Stone to keep discreet tabs on Cameron and Angela's activities while I was gone. Marcus was a former police detective who specialized in white-collar crime, and David had worked with him on several cases. But there was one more thing I needed to handle personally. I picked up my phone and dialed my neighbour, Helen Kovac. Helen was 78, sharp as a tack, and had been watching over my house and collecting my mail whenever I travelled for the past 15 years. More importantly, she was naturally suspicious and had never particularly liked Cameron. "Natasha, dear, how are you? I heard about your cruise. How exciting!" "Helen, I need to ask you a favour, and it's going to sound strange." "Well, now you have my attention." "While I'm gone, if Cameron or Angela come by the house for any reason, even if they say it's just to check on things, I need you to call me immediately. And if possible, I need you to pay attention to what they're doing." There was a pause. "Natasha, is everything all right?" "I hope so, but I have some concerns about their intentions regarding my property." Helen's voice sharpened immediately. She'd lived through the Depression and 2 wars, and she understood exactly what I was hinting at. "Those concerns wouldn't happen to involve them thinking they can help themselves to things while you're away, would they?" "Something like that. Say no more. I'll be watching like a hawk. And Natasha, I've got that new digital camera my grandson gave me. Takes excellent pictures, even through windows." I smiled for the first time all day. "Helen, you're wonderful." "Honey, I've been suspicious of that boy since he was 16 and I caught him going through your mailbox. A mother's love can blind her to a lot of things, but neighbours see everything." After hanging up with Helen, I made one more call to my granddaughter Zoe's other grandmother, Angela's mother, Patricia. Patricia and I had always maintained a cordial relationship, but we weren't particularly close. Tonight, however, I needed information. "Patricia, hi, it's Natasha. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. How are you, dear?" "I'm well, thank you. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. When you've talked to Angela recently, has she mentioned anything about my living situation? Whether she thinks I should consider downsizing or anything like that?" Another pause. In my experience, when people pause before answering questions about family finances, it's rarely good news. "Well," Patricia said carefully, "she did mention that you're alone in that big house now, and maybe it was time to think about something more manageable." "Did she say anything specific about what I should do with the house?" She mentioned that Cameron might be willing to help you handle the sale when you're ready. She said you probably don't understand all the legal complexities involved in selling property." My hand tightened on the phone. "What else did she say?" "Natasha, I probably shouldn't be sharing this, but Angela did say something about how Cameron was worried about your decision-making lately. She said you'd been signing papers without reading them, forgetting important appointments, that sort of thing." They'd been laying groundwork with extended family too, building their narrative of my supposed decline. "Patricia, have you noticed any confusion or memory problems when we've talked?" "Goodness, no. You've always been sharp as a tack. Why would you ask that?" "Just curious. Well, I should let you go. I'm leaving for a cruise on Sunday, so I wanted to touch base." "Oh, that sounds lovely. You have a wonderful time." After I hung up, I added Patricia's information to my notes. The scope of Cameron and Angela's planning was becoming clearer, and it was far more elaborate than I'd initially realised. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were systematically destroying my reputation to justify it. As I headed upstairs to start actually packing for the cruise, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognise the woman looking back at me. Gone was the soft, trusting widow who'd spent 2 years grieving and letting other people handle the complicated parts of life. In her place stood someone harder, more determined. Someone who looked ready for battle. "All right, Cameron," I whispered to my reflection. "Let's see how clever you really are." Sunday morning dawned grey and drizzly, fitting weather for what felt like the most complicated day of my life. My suitcase sat by the front door, packed with cruise clothes that I might never actually need. Because despite all our planning, David and I both knew this could go sideways in a dozen different ways. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Cameron stood on my porch, looking like the perfect, devoted son. Crisp khakis, polo shirt, concerned smile. And Angela's silver sedan in my driveway. "Ready for your big adventure, Mum?" "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, which was probably more honest than he realised. Cameron loaded my suitcase into their car while Angela fussed over me, checking that I had my passport, my cruise documents, and those insurance papers I'd supposedly filled out. Sex 0.05. I'd actually completed them exactly as they'd wanted, with Cameron as the beneficiary. Let them think their plan was working perfectly. The drive to Cleveland's port was 45 minutes of the most surreal conversation of my life. Cameron and Angela chatted cheerfully about the ship's amenities, the ports I'd visit, all the relaxation I deserved. Angela had even researched the ship's medical facilities, just in case you don't feel well, Mum Natasha. How thoughtful. "Oh, and Mum," Cameron said as we pulled into the port parking area, "I almost forgot. While you're gone, Angela and I might need to stop by the house to check on a few things. The basement's been making that weird noise again, and I want to make sure there are no pipe problems while you're away." "Of course, sweetheart. You know where the spare key is." What he didn't know was that Helen would be watching every move they made, and that David had already changed the locks on my home office. The spare key they'd find would open the front door, but nothing else important. The cruise terminal was bustling with excited families and couples, all heading off on their dream vacations. I watched a grandmother about my age hugging her grandchildren goodbye, and for a moment the weight of what I was doing hit me hard. But then Angela squeezed my arm and said, "Don't worry about anything back home, Mum Natasha. We'll take good care of everything for you." The coldness in her voice, barely masked by artificial sweetness, reminded me exactly why I was doing this. After checking in and going through security, we reached the point where only passengers could continue. Cameron hugged me tightly, and for just a second, I remembered the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. "Have the time of your life, Mum. You deserve every minute of happiness." If I hadn't known what I knew, I would have cried at how sincere he sounded. Angela's hug was briefer, more perfunctory. "Send us lots of pictures, and don't worry about calling, just focus on relaxing." Don't worry about calling. Because in their plan, I wouldn't be able to. I waved goodbye and walked toward the ship, knowing they were watching me go. Once I was out of their sight, I found a quiet corner and made a phone call. "Marcus? It's Natasha. I'm about to board. Are you in position?" "Already watching them," came Marcus Stone's gravelly voice. "They're still in the parking lot and Mrs. Mitchell is on her phone. Looks like an excited conversation. Keep me posted. And, Marcus, be careful. I have a feeling they might be more dangerous than we think." My cabin was small but comfortable, with a tiny balcony overlooking the ocean. As the ship pulled away from shore, I stood on that balcony and watched Cleveland fade into the distance, knowing that by the time I saw it again, my life would be completely different. But before I could focus on what was happening back home, I had my own mission to complete aboard this ship, because David and I had realized something crucial during our planning sessions. If Cameron and Angela were truly hoping for an accident to happen to me, they needed this cruise to look legitimate, which meant they'd be tracking my activities, maybe even staying in contact with the ship somehow. So I needed to be the perfect cruise passenger, visible, happy, doing all the things a relaxing grandmother would do. I needed to provide them with a believable story while documenting everything that happened back home. I unpacked my clothes, set up my camera, and prepared for the most dangerous performance of my life. The ship's horn sounded long and mournful as we sailed into the open ocean. Game on. The first day at sea passed in the blur of forced normalcy. I attended the welcome reception, signed up for a pottery class, and had dinner at the captain's table with other solo travellers. I smiled. I laughed. I took pictures by the pool. To anyone watching, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a happy grandmother enjoying her dream vacation. But every few hours I slipped away to my cabin to check my phone. No calls yet from Helen or Marcus, which either meant Cameron and Angela were being patient, or they were being very, very careful. It was Tuesday evening, our second day at sea, when my phone finally rang. "Natasha, it's David. We have a problem." My heart jumped. What kind of problem? Cameron showed up at my office this morning with Angela and a woman claiming to be a court-appointed advocate for elderly affairs. They had paperwork suggesting you've been declared mentally incompetent. I sank onto my cabin's small chair. That's impossible. Of course it's impossible, but the documents look official. They're requesting immediate access to your accounts to protect your assets while you're in a vulnerable state. The advocate claims you signed papers agreeing to this before you left. David, I never signed anything like that. I know you didn't. But Natasha, these documents are sophisticated forgeries. Whoever they're working with has serious connections. I thought about Cameron's gambling debts, about the dangerous people he owed money to. What did he tell them? I told them I'd need to verify everything with the courts before releasing any information. That bought us maybe 48 hours before they can get the judge to review their request. And if a judge believes their paperwork?
then they could potentially gain access to some of your accounts, at least temporarily. The trust protections would hold, but your checking and savings accounts could be vulnerable. I closed my eyes, feeling the ship's gentle motion beneath me. David, there's something I haven't told you about Richard's planning. What? He didn't just set up trusts for the major assets. The night before he died, he gave me a safety deposit box key and made me promise to check the contents if I ever felt threatened by family members. David was quiet for a moment. Natasha, what's in that box? I don't know. I was too grief-stricken to deal with it after the funeral, and then I just forgot about it. But Richard was very specific about when I should open it. Where's the box? First National Bank on Maple Street, box 247. Natasha, I need that key. It's in my jewellery box at home, the small wooden compartment at the back. Can you call Helen and have her— No. The word came out sharper than I intended. David, if Cameron and Angela are desperate enough to forge court documents, they're probably watching my house closely. I can't risk Helen getting caught up in this. Then what do you suggest? I thought about Marcus, about Helen keeping watch, about Cameron's desperation and Angela's cold calculation. How long until the ship docks in Jamaica? According to your itinerary, you should reach Montego Bay tomorrow morning. I'm getting off this ship. Natasha, that's exactly what they don't want you to do. Which is exactly why I need to do it. David, I want you to file for an emergency injunction against any account access. Use whatever legal manoeuvres you can to slow them down. That will tip them off that you know what they're doing. Good. Let them know I'm fighting back. But more importantly, I need you to get into that safety deposit box. Richard wouldn't have made me promise to check it unless he'd left something crucial. How do you suggest I do that? I don't have a key or legal authority. I smiled, feeling more like my old self than I had in months. David, you were Richard's best friend for 25 years. Are you telling me he never gave you emergency access to anything? There was a long pause. Well, there was that power of attorney document he insisted I keep. Just in case his wife needed protecting from exactly this situation. Natasha, if I use that document, there's no going back. This becomes a full legal war. Then it's time for war. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the Caribbean sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Other passengers were gathering for evening activities, dancing, shows, late dinners. Normal people doing normal vacation things. I pulled out my phone and called the ship's guest services. This is Mrs. Mitchell in cabin 842. I need to arrange an excursion for tomorrow's port stop in Jamaica, but not one of the standard tours. I need transportation to the airport. The young man on the phone sounded confused. Ma'am, are you leaving the cruise early? Yes, I am, and I need it arranged quietly. It's a family emergency. As I made arrangements to abandon the cruise that was supposed to be my final voyage, I thought about Richard's safety deposit box and what secrets my careful husband had left behind. Cameron thought he'd planned for every contingency. He was about to discover that his father had been 2 steps ahead of him all along. I barely slept that night. The ship rocked gently as we sailed toward Jamaica, but my mind was racing with possibilities and worst-case scenarios. What had Richard hidden in that safety deposit box? What had he known or suspected that made him prepare for this exact situation? At 6 a.m, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. They're moving fast. Observed subjects at your house yesterday evening. Appeared to be photographing documents. Also noted a black sedan with Nevada plates parked across the street for several hours. Nevada plates. Las Vegas. Cameron's gambling debts were following him home. Another text came through, this one from Helen. "Dear, those two were in your house for over 3 hours yesterday. Through my kitchen window, I could see lights on in rooms that should have been empty. I took pictures like you asked." My heart pounded. They weren't just looking for documents. They were searching for something specific. But what? The ship docked in Montego Bay at 8 a.m. sharp. I'd arranged for a taxi to take me directly to the airport, claiming a family emergency to the cruise staff. They were sympathetic and helpful, arranging for my luggage to be forwarded to my home address. As the taxi wound through the Jamaican countryside, I called David. "Please tell me you have good news," I said without preamble. "Mixed news. We got into the safety deposit box an hour ago using Richard's emergency power of attorney. Natasha, your husband left you an insurance policy." "What kind of insurance policy?" "The kind that protects against exactly what Cameron is doing. There are copies of documents, photographs, even audio recordings going back several years." I gripped the phone tighter. Audio recordings of what? Conversations between Cameron and various people about money, debts, and ways to access your assets. Richard had been investigating his own son, Natasha. Some of these recordings are from over a year ago. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible. Richard knew Cameron was planning something this long ago. It appears so, but there's more. Richard documented Cameron's gambling problems extensively. Casino records, debt agreements, even photos of Cameron meeting with people who look very much like loan sharks. Why didn't he tell me? David's voice was gentle. "There's a letter addressed to you. Richard wrote that he hoped you'd never have to read it, but if you did, it meant his worst fears had come true." The taxi pulled up to the airport. "David, I'm about to board a flight home. Don't tell anyone, not Helen, not Marcus, nobody. If Cameron thinks I'm still on that cruise ship, we have an advantage." "What's your plan?" "I'm going to read my husband's letter, review his evidence, and then I'm going to finish what he started." The flight from Jamaica to Cleveland was the longest 3 hours of my life. I kept imagining Cameron and Angela in my house, going through my belongings, perhaps celebrating their success. They had no idea that Richard had been documenting their crimes for over a year. By the time I landed, David had arranged for a car service to pick me up, not a taxi that might be traceable, but a private car with tinted windows. I was beginning to understand that my sweet, trusting husband had been far more strategic than I'd ever realized. The car took me to David's office, where he was waiting with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Natasha, before you look at this, I want you to know that what Richard discovered, it's going to hurt." I took the folder with steady hands. "David, they planned to kill me. I think I can handle whatever my husband found." The first document was Richard's letter, written in his careful handwriting. "My darling Tasha, if you're reading this, then our son has become someone I hoped he'd never become. I've been watching Cameron for 18 months now, ever since I noticed discrepancies in some financial discussions we had. What I discovered broke my heart, but I couldn't tell you while I was alive because I kept hoping he'd change course. Cameron has been planning to steal from us for over 2 years. The gambling debts are real and extensive. He owes nearly $500,000 to very dangerous people. But more than that, he's been researching ways to have you declared incompetent so he can access everything we built together. I've documented everything, the forged signatures, the fake medical consultations, even recordings of him discussing removing obstacles with Angela. I pray you never have to use this evidence. But if you do, Know that I'm proud of the strong woman you've always been. Fight back, my love. Fight with everything you have. And remember, you're not just protecting yourself. You're protecting our grandchildren from growing up with criminals for parents. Forever yours, Richard. I set the letter down with shaking hands. Behind it were photographs, bank records, transcripts of recorded conversations, and a timeline that painted a picture of betrayal so complete it took my breath away. Cameron hadn't just planned to steal from me. He'd been planning it since before his father died. "David," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "how quickly can we have them arrested?" "With this evidence, we can have warrants issued within hours." I looked at my watch. It was 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. Cameron and Angela thought I was still enjoying Caribbean sunshine, completely unaware that their world was about to collapse. Then let's end this. While David worked on getting the arrest warrants prepared, I had one more stop to make. I needed to see with my own eyes what Cameron and Angela had done to my house. The car service dropped me off 2 blocks away, and I walked through my own neighbourhood feeling like a spy in my own life. Helen's house was dark. She was probably at her Wednesday evening bridge club, but I could see lights on in my kitchen and living room. They were still there. I crept around to the back of my house, using the key I'd hidden under the garden gnome that Richard had always hated but I'd refused to throw away. The back door opened silently, and I slipped into my own laundry room like a burglar. Voices drifted from the front of the house. Cameron and Angela, but also a third voice I didn't recognise. Male, gruff, with an accent that sounded distinctly not from Ohio. I crept down the hallway until I could hear their conversation clearly. "Told you would have the money by Friday," Cameron was saying, his voice tight with stress. "Friday was last week," the unfamiliar voice replied. "Mr. Romano is getting impatient. Very impatient. Look, the cruise ship doesn't dock until Sunday. We need her reported missing first, then the insurance claim, then—" "Cameron," Angela interrupted, "show him the documents. Explain how this works." I heard papers rustling. "See, we've already had her declared mentally incompetent. These are the court orders giving us control of her accounts. By tomorrow we'll have access to everything." The stranger's voice was sceptical. "And you're sure the old lady won't come back and cause problems?" "She's not coming back," Angela said with chilling certainty. The ship's medical staff was very understanding about her condition. Elderly passengers with dementia sometimes wander off at port stops. Very tragic, but these things happen. My blood turned to ice. They hadn't just planned to steal from me. They'd arranged for me to disappear. Permanently. "What about the cruise record showing she boarded?" the stranger asked. "That's the beauty of it," Cameron said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "She did board. She checked in, attended activities, took meals. Then somewhere between Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, she had an episode and wandered off. By the time anyone realises she's missing, the ship will be hundreds of miles away. And the body? Never found. Happens all the time in the Caribbean. Currents, sharks, deep water. The family grieves, the insurance pays out, and everyone moves on." I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping. They'd planned my murder down to the last detail. "How much are we talking about?" the stranger asked. $2 million in life insurance, plus another $3 million in assets once we gain control. Mr. Romano gets his money. We get what's left. And if something goes wrong? Angela's laugh was cold as winter. What could go wrong? As far as the world knows, Natasha Mitchell is currently enjoying the buffet on a cruise ship. She's been posting pictures on social media, chatting with other passengers, living her best life.
That stopped me cold. Social media posts. But I hadn't posted anything. "Show him the photos," Cameron said. I heard a phone being passed around. "We've been maintaining her social media presence," Angela explained. "Pictures from the ship, updates about the food, comments about how relaxing it all is. Her neighbours, her friends, even her other relatives think she's having the time of her life." They'd been impersonating me online, creating a false timeline of my activities while planning my death. "Smart," the stranger admitted. "When do you expect the missing person report?" "Sunday evening, when the ship docks and she doesn't disembark. The cruise line will contact us as her emergency contacts. We'll play the worried family, maybe suggest that she's been confused lately, prone to wandering." I'd heard enough, more than enough. I slipped back out through the laundry room and made my way to the street, my hands shaking as I called David. "David, forget the arrest warrants. We need FBI involvement. This isn't just fraud, it's conspiracy to commit murder." "Natasha, where are you?" "I'm at my house. They're here and they're not alone. David, they planned to kill me. They've been faking my social media posts to create an alibi. Get away from there immediately. Meet me at the FBI field office downtown." As I walked quickly away from my own home, I thought about that sweet grandmother I'd seen at the cruise terminal, hugging her grandchildren goodbye. She'd been travelling for joy and adventure. I'd been travelling as bait in a trap I didn't even know existed. But now the tables were turning, and it was time for Cameron and Angela to discover what happened when you tried to outsmart a woman who'd had 72 years to learn how the world really worked. The FBI field office in downtown Cleveland was nothing like the sleek buildings you see in movies. It was a practical, grey concrete structure that looked like it meant business, which, considering what I was about to report, seemed exactly right. David met me in the lobby with a woman in a navy suit who looked like she could stare down a hurricane and ask it to please move along. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Special Agent Rebecca Torres. Mr. Harrington has briefed me on your situation, and I have to say, in 15 years with the Bureau, I've rarely seen a case this comprehensive." She led us to a conference room where Richard's evidence was spread across a table like pieces of a puzzle that painted the ugliest picture imaginable. "Let's start with what we know for certain," Agent Torres said, settling into her chair with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Your son and daughter-in-law have committed multiple felonies, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and based on what you overheard tonight, conspiracy to commit murder." Hearing it laid out so bluntly made my chest tight. "Agent Torres, what happens to my grandchildren if their parents are arrested?" "That's a concern for family court, Mrs. Mitchell, but right now we need to focus on preventing a murder, yours, and building an airtight case." She opened a laptop and began typing. "The evidence your husband collected is remarkable, but we need to catch them in the act to make charges stick. Recorded conversations, forged documents, and witness testimony are good, but catching them attempting to access your accounts while believing you're dead? That's prosecution gold." "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing. You're going to do absolutely nothing, except stay safe while we handle this." I sat up straighter. "Agent Torres, with all due respect, I've been handling difficult situations for 72 years. I'm not going to sit in a safe house while my family's future hangs in the balance." She studied me for a moment, then smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her. "Mr. Harrington warned me you'd say that. All right, here's what we're going to do." For the next 2 hours, we planned an operation that would have made Richard proud.
The FBI would monitor all my accounts and properties while maintaining the illusion that I was still on the cruise ship. Agent Torres had contacts at the cruise line who could ensure my disappearance would be reported exactly as Cameron and Angela expected. Meanwhile, Marcus would continue surveillance, while federal agents gathered additional evidence. Every phone call, every financial transaction, every meeting with loan sharks, it would all be documented. The key, Agent Torres explained, is letting them commit enough crimes to ensure serious prison time, but not so many that innocent people get hurt. What about the loan sharks? That's actually a gift. Interstate gambling debts, potential money laundering, threats of violence. We can bring in organised crime charges. Your son's small-time fraud just became a federal case. As we finalised details, my phone buzzed with a text message. Agent Torres gestured for me to check it. It was from Angela's Facebook account, but the message was clearly meant for Cameron. Mum Natasha is having such a wonderful time. She posted the most beautiful sunset photo from the ship's deck. Says she's feeling better than she has in years. I showed the screen to Agent Torres. They're still posting as me. Perfect. Keep that evidence coming. She handed me a special phone. This device will record everything automatically. Any calls, texts, or voicemails from Cameron or Angela get saved directly to our servers. David had been quiet during most of the planning, but now he spoke up. Natasha, are you sure about this? Once we trigger this operation, there's no going back. Your family will never be the same. I thought about Tyler's chocolate-stained smile, about Zoe's weekly tea parties, about the innocence that would be shattered when their parents were arrested. But then I thought about the alternative. Children growing up thinking their parents got away with murder. David, my family was destroyed the moment Cameron decided I was worth more dead than alive. We're not breaking it apart. We're saving what's left. Agent Torres stood up. All right, Mrs. Mitchell. As of right now, you're officially a dead woman. Let's see how much your son loves you when he thinks he's finally got what he wanted. The next morning, I read my own obituary online. Well, not exactly an obituary. More like a concerned news report about a missing cruise passenger. Local grandmother disappears during Caribbean vacation, read the headline. The article described how Natasha Mitchell, 72, had apparently wandered away from her tour group in Jamaica and hadn't been seen since. Cameron had called the cruise line that morning, playing the role of the worried son to perfection. The FBI had recordings of him asking about search efforts, expressing concern about his mother's recent confusion, and requesting that he be notified immediately if I was found. He was building his alibi while planning to collect my insurance money. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the woman who'd raised him, and now it was time for the final act of this deadly family drama. Thursday morning came with news that made my blood boil and my resolve strengthen all at once. Agent Torres called me at the safe house apartment where I'd spent the night. Mrs. Mitchell, they moved faster than we expected. Cameron filed for emergency access to your life insurance policy this morning, claiming financial hardship due to search and rescue costs. He also attempted to transfer funds from your checking account. Did you stop him? We let the checking account transfer go through. It was only $5,000 and we need him to commit the crimes we can prosecute. But the insurance company flagged the life insurance claim and called us. I was staying in a furnished apartment 2 miles from my house, close enough to respond quickly, but far enough to stay hidden. Through the window I could see ordinary people starting their ordinary Thursday, heading to work, walking dogs, living normal lives where their children didn't try to murder them for money. What's the timeline now? Based on the fake social media posts, your disappearance was supposed to be discovered when the cruise ship docks Sunday evening. That gives us 3 more days to document their crimes. And the loan sharks? We've identified the man you heard, Vincent Romano, known associate of the Marconi crime family out of Las Vegas. He's been on our radar for years.
If we can connect him to this conspiracy, we can potentially bring down a significant portion of their Ohio operations. Marcus called an hour later with an update that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Mitchell, I followed Cameron to a storage unit facility this morning. He met with Angela and another woman I couldn't identify. Older, maybe 60, professional looking. They spent about an hour going through boxes and documents. What kind of documents? I couldn't get close enough to see details, but they were copying things, taking photographs. The older woman had what looked like official government forms. Agent Torres had been listening on speakerphone. Marcus, can you get us the storage unit number? Unit 47 at Eastside Storage on Maple Road. The rental agreement is in Angela's name. After Marcus hung up, Agent Torres was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Mitchell, I think they've been planning this longer than we realised. Storage units filled with forged documents, official-looking paperwork, professional accomplices. This isn't amateur fraud. This is organised crime. That afternoon I got a call that broke my heart into pieces, so small I wasn't sure they'd ever fit back together. "Grandma Natasha, it's Zoe." I nearly dropped the phone. "Sweetheart, how are you, baby girl?" "I'm sad. Daddy says you got lost on your boat trip and the police can't find you." A 9-year-old voice was trembling with tears. She was trying not to cry. "Oh, honey. But Daddy's being weird. He keeps smiling when he thinks I'm not looking. And yesterday I heard him tell Mummy that we might get to move to a bigger house soon." My heart shattered. Cameron was celebrating my disappearance in front of his own children. "Zoe, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that?" "Yes, Grandma." "I'm not lost. I'm perfectly safe. But I need you to keep that a secret for just a little while longer, okay? Can you be brave for Grandma?" "You're really not lost." "I'm really not lost. I promise you, baby girl. And very soon, I'm going to see you again." After Zoe hung up, I sat in that sterile apartment and cried for the first time since this nightmare began. Not for myself, but for those innocent children who were watching their father lie to them about their grandmother's death. Agent Torres found me there an hour later, eyes red but resolve stronger than ever. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've got a problem. And an opportunity." "What kind of problem?" "Cameron just called the FBI tip line to report you missing. He's escalating the official search, which means he's getting desperate to have you declared dead." "And the opportunity?" "The storage unit. We got a warrant and found exactly what we expected. Hundreds of forged documents, identity theft materials, and what appears to be a complete manual for insurance fraud. But we also found something else." She handed me a manila folder. "They've done this before, at least 3 times targeting elderly relatives in other states. Your husband wasn't their first victim, Mrs. Mitchell. He was just their most recent." I opened the folder and saw documents relating to Angela's grandmother in Florida, Cameron's uncle in Arizona, and Angela's stepfather in Nevada. All had died under mysterious circumstances. All had left substantial insurance policies. They're serial killers. That's exactly what they are. And Mrs. Mitchell, you're not just helping us catch them for what they did to you. You're helping us get justice for people who can't speak for themselves anymore. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at that normal neighbourhood where normal families lived normal lives. "Agent Torres, how quickly can you arrest them?" "We can move tonight if you're ready." "I've been ready since the moment I heard my son planning my murder." It was time to end this. It was time for Cameron and Angela to discover that some grandmothers don't go quietly into the night. Some of us fight back with everything we've got. Friday evening, I sat in the back of an unmarked FBI van watching my own house through a monitor connected to surveillance cameras. Agent Torres had positioned herself and 6 other agents around the property, waiting for Cameron and Angela to make their move. They didn't disappoint. At 7:30 p.m, Cameron's car pulled into my driveway. But this time they weren't alone. Vincent Romano climbed out of the passenger seat, followed by the older woman Marcus had seen at the storage unit. "Showtime," Agent Torres said into her headset. "All units, hold position until they're inside and committing crimes." I watched my son walk up to my front door, using the spare key I'd given him in trust and love. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. Through the audio surveillance, we could hear their conversation as they entered. "Completely clean out the safe tonight," Cameron was saying. "Tomorrow, when the cruise ship docks and they can't find her, we need everything transferred and ready." "What about the lake house?" Angela asked. "Already handled. The deed transfer goes through Monday morning." The older woman spoke for the first time. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to be very clear about timing. Once the death certificate is processed, you'll have a narrow window to claim the insurance before anyone can challenge the documentation." "How narrow?" 72 hours, maximum. After that, insurance companies start asking questions we can't answer. Agent Torres looked at me. "Ready?" I'd thought I was ready. I'd thought 72 years of life had prepared me for any shock. But as I watched my son and his accomplices plan to divide up my belongings while celebrating my supposed death, I realized nothing could have prepared me for this moment. "Let's go." The FBI team moved with precision that was almost beautiful to watch. Within 60 seconds, they had the house surrounded and were through the front door. "FBI, nobody move!" I followed Agent Torres through my own front door and into a scene that will be burned into my memory forever. Cameron was standing by my mantelpiece, my late husband's watch in his hands. Angela was at my desk, going through financial documents. Vincent Romano had been photographing the contents of my safe, which they'd somehow managed to open. The older woman was sitting calmly at my kitchen table, as if she'd been invited for dinner. Cameron's face when he saw me was something I'll never be able to adequately describe. Shock, terror, confusion, and underneath it all, pure, undiluted rage. "Mom, but you're supposed to be... How are you here?" "Hello, Cameron." My voice was steadier than I'd expected. "Surprise!" Angela had gone white as paper. "This isn't possible. You're on the cruise ship. You posted pictures yesterday." "No, Angela. You posted pictures yesterday, while planning my murder." Vincent Romano was already in handcuffs, but he looked at me with something almost like respect. "Smart lady," he said to Agent Torres. "Smarter than these 2 idiots deserved." The older woman, who turned out to be a disbarred attorney named Patricia Hendricks, maintained her composure even as she was being arrested. "Very impressive, Mrs. Mitchell. Though I have to say your son was convinced you'd never figure it out." That's when Cameron found his voice again. "Mom, you don't understand. I was trying to help you. The gambling debts, they were going to hurt you too if I couldn't pay them back. So you decided to kill me instead. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. It was just supposed to be about the money." I stepped closer to my son, this man I'd raised from a baby, who'd learned to walk holding my fingers, who'd cried in my arms when he'd scraped his knees. "Cameron, you planned my murder.
You celebrated my death in front of your children. You've been stealing from me for 2 years, and apparently I'm not even your first victim. His face crumpled, not with remorse, but with self-pity. Mom, please, think about Zoe and Tyler. They need their father. They need their father to be a good man. Since that's apparently impossible, they need him to be in prison where he can't hurt anyone else. Angela tried one last desperate play. Mom, Natasha, we can work this out. Family doesn't have to destroy family. I looked at this woman who'd sat at my dinner table, who'd called me Mum, who'd let my grandchildren sign a card wishing me well on the vacation she hoped would be my last. Angela, you stopped being family the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. As they were led away in handcuffs, Cameron turned back one more time. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I know you are, sweetheart. You're sorry you got caught. The house fell quiet, except for the sound of Agent Torres coordinating with other teams. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal, and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. It was over. 6 months later, I sat in a courthouse watching my son receive a sentence of 25 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering. Angela got 20 years. The disbarred attorney received 15 years, and Vincent Romano was looking at federal charges that would keep him locked up until he was too old to threaten anyone. But the real victory wasn't the prison sentences. The real victory was sitting next to me in the courtroom gallery. Zoe and Tyler, now living with Angela's sister in Michigan, who'd turned out to be everything Angela wasn't. Kind, honest, and completely horrified by what her sister had done. Grandma Natasha, Tyler whispered as the judge read Cameron's sentence. Does this mean Daddy was really bad? I squeezed his small hand. It means Daddy made very bad choices, sweetheart, but it also means he can't make those choices anymore. Zoe, now 10 and far too wise for her age, had been quiet through most of the proceedings. But as we walked out of the courthouse, she slipped her hand into mine. Grandma, I'm glad you're not dead. Me too, baby girl. Me too. That evening, back in my house, my real house, not some FBI safe house, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and Richard's letter, reading it one more time. Fight back, my love. Fight with everything you have. I'd done exactly that. But more than fighting back, I discovered something about myself that I'd forgotten during 2 years of grief and self-doubt. I was stronger than anyone had given me credit for, including myself. The lake house that Cameron had planned to steal was exactly where it belonged, in a trust for Zoe and Tyler. My financial assets were secure, my home was mine, and most importantly, 2 innocent children were safe from parents who'd valued money more than love. Helen Kovac knocked on my door as the sun was setting, carrying a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen in months. Well, dear, I have to say, that was better than any mystery novel I've ever read. I'm just glad it's over. Over? Honey, it's not over. It's just beginning. She settled into the porch chair next to mine. You know what you've proven to yourself? You've proven that age is just a number when it comes to fighting for what's right. She was right. The scared, grieving widow who'd boarded that cruise ship 6 months ago was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, but only with people who'd earned it. Someone who'd learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, loyalty, and protecting the innocent. someone who'd learned that justice delayed isn't always justice denied, especially when you're patient enough to build an airtight case. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts.
Sex 0.05 Agent Torres's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Mitchell, I wanted to let you know, we've connected your case to 14 other suspicious deaths across 6 states. Your courage to fight back has given us the evidence to reopen investigations that could bring justice to families who thought they'd never get answers. After I hung up, I sat quietly watching the sunset paint my neighbourhood in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in Michigan, my grandchildren were probably getting ready for bed, safe with people who loved them properly. Somewhere in federal prison, my son was learning that actions have consequences. And here in Ohio, a 72-year-old grandmother was learning that it's never too late to discover your own strength. They say blood is thicker than water. But justice, I've learned, is thicker than both. If you've made it this far in Natasha's story, I hope it's reminded you that standing up for yourself is never too late. And family loyalty should never come at the cost of your own safety. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from around the world. I love hearing from viewers who understand that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who know exactly where you keep your spare key. Don't forget to subscribe to Madam Susan's Stories for more tales of courage, justice, and grandmothers who refuse to go quietly into the night. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and remember, respect isn't given by age, it's earned by courage. And trust me, you're braver than you think.